I've seen a lot of students across the board, and I teach at a Christian school, I've taught in an online school, and I have 2 children, 2 girls who are ages 13 and 16. So I think I'm finally at a point where I feel like I have some experience and some things that I've witnessed with my own children, with other people's children, kind of across the board, and there's just some universal truths that are coming out. So being the age that we are, most of us when we were kids didn't have a computer in our home. So we probably had very limited exposure to technology. I did growing up. I can remember when my mom got, I think it was like a Texas Instruments computer, and like if you wanted to play a game, you had to program it with like 500 lines of commands, and if you made one mistake, the game wasn't going to run. Okay, so forget it. We went back to Uno and Connect 4. You had a typewriter, not a computer, and it was so exciting when the typewriter tape came out, so you didn't have to start all over, right? And oh, sweet baby Jesus, when the autocorrect typewriter came out, we like thought we were the best, right? When it backed up and it erased. Our kids have no experiences with that. If you show them a typewriter, most of them are like, what the heck? Now they can get a typewriter these days, but it's one that they can set their iPad in. So they're just getting the experience of hitting a typewriter keys, but it's still a digital experience. The furthest we went, I think when we were in school, was probably having like a Nintendo, or the Super Nintendo, and it was very limited. You weren't interacting with anyone other than the screen. So you couldn't call up your friends and have 5 of us on there playing as different characters. If you wanted to play a video game with your friends, they actually had to come to your house. I know Brady looked shocked or my house. But when I got married, I married a tech geek. He loved technology. I think he probably has like the first computer ever made for the home. And he followed all of the trends, and so he was the one who kind of ushered me into the world of computers. But keeping in mind, by this time, I was in my 20s. And so my brain was probably, if not already, fully formed and developed. And I was coming at it from a whole different standpoint from our kids. And even then, what could you do on a computer? Then you could do your college coursework, and you could print it out on those little dot matrix printers. But I certainly wasn't getting online and chatting and doing the internet. As time went on, we kind of moved on. Remember, we used to get the little AOL discs. So the internet came along, and then it was in your home. But you had to pay for it unless you got 100 free hours, so you collected those discs like they were candy, right? Every time you could. You always had to change your username and password every time your hours ran out, you got a new disc. You couldn't be on the computer if somebody was on the phone. So all of these things, so we gradually kind of fell into it as adults, and we didn't see a lot of the downsides because we gradually fell into it. Because our lives were busy, we didn't get into all of these things our kids are getting into. The first time I experienced an online chat room was when I was pregnant with my first child, and it was for moms who were expecting babies in March. And you got together and you could kind of type back and forth. But chat rooms even then weren't really a big thing. And then eventually MySpace came out, but by then I was too old for it. So I didn't pay too much attention to it. You kind of heard about it from the kids, but even in kids that I was teaching at that time, technology wasn't a big deal. They didn't have cell phones. We were still in pager land for the adults. So if someone wanted to get a hold of you, you got the beep, beep, beep and the number, and you actually had to call and talk to them. So as time went on, like I said, it was just a gradual thing with the adults, but I didn't see any negative sides to technology. Every time I used technology, it made my life easier. It made it easier to plan, it made it easier to connect, it made it easier to share information with people. So when my children came along, I had no qualms about putting technology into their hands at a very young age. I really didn't see the problem. My 16-year-old, who is now a voracious reader, was not at first. They tell you all these stories, like when you're pregnant, read to your child, read to them in the womb, did that, did the headphones with the classical music. She didn't like classical music. I don't know what they were selling. But I read to her from the day she was born, picture books, and she still wasn't reading by age 5. It was hard for me to understand. I read at 3. I couldn't understand why she wouldn't read. I homeschooled her in kindergarten. I would get frustrated, doubly frustrated because one, I'm a parent, but two, I was a teacher, and why couldn't I teach my own child to read simple sight words like the? How many times do you need to hear it? It's 3 letters, sweetheart. Every time you see it, it's the. We both survived, barely. But what actually taught her to read, ironically, was the Nintendo DS. So she said to me one day, she said, "Mom, I don't know why I need to learn how to read. I don't understand why you just can't read to me the rest of my life. And I was like, because I have a life. But I noticed her cousin, who was 3 years old or 6 years older, had a Nintendo DS, and she really wanted to play. And God bless Nintendo DS at the time, but in order to play, everything was in a speech bubble, and you had to be able to read. And so she had to learn how to read in order to be able to play that, and that was kind of our gateway for her into the world of technology. She loved music, so after that they came out, if you remember, with the iPods, and all the iPods did was play music. It didn't do anything else. You guys remember that? The little swirly thing? Black and white screen. And so I didn't think twice about putting a preset list of songs on that and handing it to her. A jukebox in your pocket? Come on. Who doesn't want that? As a matter of fact, in my basement, I have an actual jukebox that belonged to my dad. And when my children asked me what it was, I said, well, it's kind of like an iPod when I was a kid. And they were like, what? Whatever. So we willingly gave them both iPods, and we didn't think anything of it, but it's kind of like E.T. with the Reese's Pieces. You know, you're just kind of picking them up one at a time. And so the iPod, of course, got bigger and greater, and pretty soon they had apps. And then the iPod became like a smartphone. It could do everything but call, but now if you get the apps, you can even call on it. And then it became tablets, and then it became laptops. But because my experience had been so positive with it, I didn't have any qualms about putting it in my child's hands. So when she was 7 years old and her best friend moved out of state, and she realized that they could keep in touch through social media, through Facebook, her cousins who are also in another state, they could Facebook. As a parent, I didn't see the inherent danger. It was connection to family. I opened an account for her because she had to be 13. I opened an account, I put it in her profile that her parent had opened the account for family and friend communication. But we don't think like predators, and we don't think like people with ulterior motives. And so I didn't have, any fears about her being on there at a young age. And so that kind of started her with Facebook. She had a little sister. I'm sure you guys all remember the Webkinz craze, right? You buy the stuffed animal, you get the code. It was awesome because with the code you logged in and you got to furnish your Webkinz apartment, and you got to buy stuff, and you got to play games. But the key was, if I wanted to play games with you, I could do that too. So if my friend got a Webkin, our Webkinz could play together online, and how awesome was that? And they kind of kept you with it, right? Because your Webkin expires after a year, but if you buy another one, then it reactivates the original one. Some of you are going to have no experience. If you have no experience with Webkins, just be glad you missed that craze. And that became my first experience with some of the issues that could be caused with things on the computer. So again, I felt she was safe. She was talking directly to a friend. There were no strangers interacting with her. We had not even gotten to that point yet in our journey. So one day she had a friend over, and the friend had a cell phone, and all of a sudden there was a knock on my door. And I opened the door, and the little girl's mom was there. And I was like, well, she was supposed to stay overnight, so I'm not quite sure why the mom was like, is everything okay? And she's like, yes, my daughter just called me, she wants to go home. So they had a conflict. And in the past, where they might have come to me to kind of work it out, the other one was like, I'm out of here. She called her mom, come get me. So she went home, and when she left her Webkin account open on one of our computers. Now you've got two girls who are having a tiff, and if you have daughters, we kind of know how this works sometimes. So my daughter looked at her Webkin world and thought, man, I really like the furniture she's got in her apartment. I think I'll just gift it to myself. So she did. So she gifted her friend's Webkin furniture to herself. And so I get this phone call from the mom, and she says, the weirdest thing happened. All the furniture disappeared from my daughter's Webkin apartment, but we can see it in your daughter's. So then I had to kind of call her in, and then we kind of talked about it. So that was kind of our first, a very kind of funny and mild entrance into how kids would then come to use social media to get at each other. And so we had kind of a talk about that. Minecraft came along. I don't know if you're familiar with Minecraft. I don't know how kids do it. It's pixelated. We have spent our whole lives wanting less pixelated computer graphics, and their favorite game is pixelated computer graphics. I don't get it. But the cool thing is that they can see it. In their heads, they see the building, they see the whole village, they know how many feet they have to dig down to get to the underground tunnel. So that was, you would think, for brain-based education and critical thinking, that was kind of cool. Again, they could play with their friends. They could all get on Minecraft. They could hold dialogue on the bottom. They could put their headphones and their little microphone on and they could talk to each other. In the beginning, it was super innocent. Minecraft was super innocent. It didn't stay that way for long. So if you have kids on Minecraft, you want to kind of keep your ears open for that as we talk more about it. So my point is, my children have never, ever known life without technology. And probably I would say most of your children, and most of the children in our classrooms, and most of the children in the United States, this is their language. They've grown up with it. So they give way to it very, very quickly. As parents, we saw the convenience. Okay, I could be connected to my child 24/7. Whether that was a healthy mindset or not, knowing that if she was at someone's house and I needed to get at her, I could get at her immediately, that I always knew where she was, it was more than tempting, you know. I bought into it kind of completely. I liked that access with my child. And I mean, face it, if you've ever had a heart-to-heart, in-depth conversation with your child over text, and a conversation that your child probably would never have had with you face-to-face, then you were kind of sold. That they were sharing things with you that they felt safer sharing, not kind of looking at you, things they might be worried about. How are you going to take it if I tell you this? Or I'm thinking about this and I want to ask about this. And it's not like they were in another building. You know, they were upstairs and I was downstairs. But it did open the doors to some very sensitive kind of conversations. And if I told you that that didn't have an effect on the way that I treat technology with my kids today, I would be lying to you, because one of the things when I think about taking technology completely away from my kids, that's one of the things that holds me back. What am I going to miss out on with them, between them and me? Also, you know, they take all those great photos everywhere they go. I've got their childhood documented. It goes right up to their iCloud. I can pull whatever pictures I want, right? And it's fun to see the world through their eyes. They take different pictures than we would take. And so in my head, I actually have this thought, if I take it away from them, we're not going to have any of those photos. We're not going to have any of those pictures. And even though I know that we survived, and I survived, and I'm okay not having all those pictures of my childhood, still, it's there. It's that want there that they can share things. We saw the entertainment, what we thought to be educational. We thought we were expanding their intellectual horizons. Promises were made by companies touting studies. This will help your child. There'll be leaps and bounds ahead in reading and math. They just do this program. And we bought into it. The advertisements and the marketing, they were good. They spoke to areas of the brain that ring true scientifically. And what we didn't look at is who was funding the studies. And if you look at the studies, most of the studies are funded by industry. And if you find a third-party study, typically a third party who doesn't have as much money at their fingertips, so they can't market their results as effectively, you will find that they are finding that technology is having very little value, very little educational value, despite what you've heard. We saw how much they were learning through DIY videos on YouTube. So my youngest is 13 and she loves to create, and I'm sort of creative, but I'm not hands-on creative like she is. Like, she can build things and paint things and see things, and she wants to restain furniture, and I'm like, I don't even know. Okay, so she goes on YouTube and she figures it out. She taught herself a lot of cool things on YouTube. And so you start to think, well, there's value in that. But what we don't see is what they're also seeing on YouTube. So you've been on YouTube, you see what's running in the right-hand column, you see what happens when you put in a search. So my 13-year-old, when she was little, she loved the Barbie videos. And I have to say, if you've ever seen The Princess and the Pauper by Barbie, the music's kind of catchy. If you listen to it, it's on DVD, you don't have to go on YouTube. If you're a music teacher, I don't think the music's that great, but you know, I really like the song with the cat and the bubble bath, it was cool. So she would go on, and these Barbie videos would be on there in musicals, and then somebody thought, well, geez, you know what this market's really missing? X-rated Barbie videos. And that was my child's introduction into sex education. So here she was, alone with her screen, doing something innocent. I knew she was watching the Barbie video, but neither of us could have known that she was going to click on a Barbie video that would be pornographic. So most of our children have seen pornography by the age of 7. By the age of 7, they've seen it somewhere. We saw a way or the joy our children displayed when playing games with friends, and face it, we have busy lives. A lot of our friends live in different cities. Their friends, it's hard sometimes to get together for play dates with school and sports and extracurricular activities. So if they could get together for an hour or so in an evening or on the weekend with their friends and have a great time, and they were having fun, and that kind of frees us up to kind of do some things we need to do, what could be the harm? And then you start learning, who are you talking to? I don't recognize that voice. And you start realizing that in these online gaming rooms that they are playing with strangers, and strangers who don't have the best of intentions. There was a story this last week in the news about a little girl who was using the Musical.ly app. Is everyone familiar with Musical.ly? Musical.ly is an app that you go on there and you lip sync to songs, which our children are so talented at. I mean, this actually used to be something you had to be talented enough to get on a game show for, but now they can all do it. So they go on there and they record themselves lip syncing to these songs, and then they kind of put it up like an Instagram and they watch each other's videos. But the truth is that anybody can get to them, and you can't monitor it because Musical.ly deletes everything when you exit out of it or when you open it up again. Now the videos stay there, but the communications that are coming in aren't. So this particular little girl, her parents said, she doesn't have her own screens. It was always on her mother's phone. And the reason we did it is because she liked to make these duets with her cousins. And so they could do this on an online format over the phone, and it was innocent. And one day when the little girl was playing, a sentence popped up, or a question popped up on the board, or a statement popped up on the board, and it was, send me a picture. Send me a picture of yourself. Seems innocuous. She didn't realize, she thought it was one of her friend's friends, and they were all connected, and so she did. And then it came up again. Send me a picture of yourself with your shirt off. And she said no. And it came after her again. Now her parents had a dialogue with her, and she did go to her parents and say, here. And so they got together with the sheriff's department, and then the parents pretended to be the girl, and the gentleman online was asking for a picture. She said, I can't. And she said, my mom won't let me. He said, go to the bathroom, do it when they're not looking, just kind of like leading her along. There wasn't much, they said, that they could do with that person. They could probably track down the ISP address, but this is what's coming through to our children, a lot more than you think. Last night I was having a conversation with my 16-year-old, and I was telling her about tonight and some of the things that I was going to say, and she said, you can use my experiences, please don't share my name. And I said, okay. And she said, you know, Mom, what the most shocking thing to me was on Facebook was how often I got pictures of men's genitalia. And she wasn't even connected with them. She wasn't friends with them. They couldn't friend her because she was closed down. But I don't know if you know, through the message center, that anybody can send you a message. And so they would just unsolicited send her photos. They would just pop up. So, you know, I had not even known that because she, of course, she panicked, she reported it to Facebook, and then she deleted it. And she didn't want to get in trouble. So that was kind of heartbreaking to learn. So part of what I've learned through all this with my children, with your children, with students, is that, you know, they just released the movie Titanic back on Netflix. And what I always remember about Titanic is the iceberg. And they always tell you that what you see above the surface of the water is 10%, but 90% lies below the surface of the ocean, which is where the ship got into trouble. And for us, we see the 10% of what our kids are doing, or what they think we're doing, but what they're really doing, what your children are really doing under the surface would stun you. And not because they're bad children, and not because they're trying to skirt the issue, but because this is their culture and this is their world. So you probably don't even know all of the apps that your children are involved in because they don't have to physically be put on their phones. They're websites that they go to. Anonymous apps. You don't know what messages are being sent to your kids. There's a website called Saraha. I don't know if you're familiar with it. You don't have to have an account to use it. You have an account to get messages. And what it says is it's marketed as a safe place for friends and family to share truths about you, anonymously. Okay, well, if someone really has your best interest at heart and loves you, they should be able to share those truths with you. with their name or face-to-face. But what it really is, it's a cover for kind of a bullying app. And so your child could be holding their phone, and this horrific message could cross their screen, and they don't know who it came from. There's no way to trace it. They don't know. So they sit there and they wonder, and they can send anything they want, and then it disappears from the screen. The police can't track it. It's anonymous. If I send you a message and I don't have an account, sorry, there's no way for them to track it. Tons of them. Ask FM, if you're familiar with that. People can go on there, they anonymously ask kids questions to have them answered. They can ask them anything they want to. Okay, they get pretty racy. So if you have access to your child's Instagram account, a lot of times they put it in their profile. They'll put their Ask FM address, they'll put their Saraha address, and you can see, do they have it? Okay. Did you have a question? Okay.
Hey Dawn, I'm sorry, just for 1 second. We put some cards that reminded me, which raise your hand. There's cards and pens on the table. So as Dawn is talking, if you had question anything, it doesn't even have to be something that she's specifically talking about. You came here tonight with a specific question, write it down. And then we'll come around and pick them up, and then we'll give them to Dawn at the end. She'll try to incorporate those.
I said if I had only known how it would all evolve, and I know we say hindsight is 20/20, it's cliche, but it is the truth of the matter. If I had only known, if you had only known, you would never place a smart device in the hands of your children. You wouldn't do it, and they are recommending that parents not do it at least till the age of 12, and if you do, then it's in a very strict, monitored environment under very stringent conditions. We'll talk about those later. Because we just saw the tip of the iceberg. We saw the good things. Okay? We saw the good things. We didn't see how people who had ulterior motives would use it against us and would use it against our children. So physically and psychologically, what we're seeing is depression, anxiety, grooming for human trafficking, strangers entering your home even though your doors are locked and your alarm is on. Difficulties focusing, paying attention, and actual physiological rewiring of the brain. All of these we innocently placed in our children's hands, and I bet the majority of us think if I had just known then what I know now. I have seen students that I know who text from midnight to 5 a.m. and then they delete it. Their parents are doing everything they're supposed to be doing. They're monitoring. They're looking during the day. They have all the logins to all of their apps. But you know what? They're doing it while they're sleeping because they're allowed to have access to it through the night. So from midnight to 5 a.m., they're in all sorts of places, talking to all sorts of people, and they delete their footprints so that when you wake up in the morning and you check your child's phone, you go, oh, thank goodness, there's nothing on there I have to worry about. Well, there was, but it was while you slept. So to those of you in the thick of it, what we'd like to offer is some community and support. And for those of you who are thinking of stepping into that world because your children are younger, hopefully some things to think about. And what I would like to think is the mistakes that I made as a mother might be able to help kind of some of you as you navigate your way, so they kind of weren't all in vain, I suppose I would say. But just some facts today and some information to help you navigate your children's childhood, and I would say give childhood back to our kids. And that's one of the things as a teacher that I've seen, is that our kids are no longer children. They're miniature adults, and that's how they feel. So they no longer see us in an adult role. We are a parallel world. And some of you might have heard of parallel play, where kids play alongside one another, and that's how our children view us. And please don't ever think not my kid, because I'm telling you as a teacher, yes, your kid. My kid, your kid, any kid who has access to technology. And a lot of it has to do what's put out in the media for them. So when I was growing up, it was the Cosby Show and it was Growing Pains. And man, I either wanted to be a Huxtable or I wanted to be a Seaver, depending on which day it was, and if I got home in time to watch it, because there was no DVR, right? But those parents were parents, and when the kids had problems or they got backed into a corner, they went to their parents. And they got advice and they got guidance. But our kids grew up with shows like the Disney Channel, Hannah Montana, Wizards of Waverly Place, which I actually liked, but still. Okay, the parents were seen as kind of not very effective and not very bright. If you look at any of these children's shows, if you look at some of the young teen shows, Pretty Little Liars, okay? These teens are operating in a world with no parental restrictions, no transportation issues. I don't know how they get where they're going, but they manage. They have some access to some unlimited bank account in Switzerland because they get to any state or country they want to on a moment's notice without telling their parents. They make their own decisions on how they're going to spend their money and what they're going to do. And that's what our kids are seeing. They're seeing these kids on TV with great freedom. So when we stand strong in our role as parents, we're mean, we're restrictive, we're controlling, we're out of touch, we don't get it. My 16-year-old used to say, you know, Mom, I wouldn't have to do this, or I wouldn't, her words weren't act out, but I wouldn't have to do this if you just wouldn't be so controlling. If you would just let me do whatever I wanted to do, we wouldn't have this problem. And I would say, if I let you do whatever you wanted to, we'd have other problems, you know? But she truly does not understand. It's in their music, it's everything that they see. Children are capable of leading their lives independently without adult intervention. And they have ingrained this. And I see it more and more as classes come up, where they band together and they shut the adult world out. And they are dealing with some very, very serious issues. And we're talking issues like self-harm. They will know that one of their friends is harming, self-harming, is threatening suicide, and they will not go to an adult. They think they can handle it. They think they can fix it. They think they can talk their friend out of it. I did have an experience with this with my daughter. She came to me and she knew about this was happening, and I found out that a majority of children knew it was happening, and not one, we're talking double-digit kids, not one went to a parent, a teacher, a pastor. They didn't tell. Okay? They don't tell. They band together. Sometimes my littlest will come home and she'll say, tell me something that happened at school that bothered her, and I will say, well, do you feel that this is something that you need to pursue with an adult? Do you think you would like to talk to Mrs. Harmony? She says, no, Mom, we've got it. We handle these things ourselves. Okay, she's 13. I don't know what they're doing. She's 43. Half the time I don't know what I'm doing. Just kidding. 75% of the time I know. All right. So just some changes, some things that you might not be aware of. My background, my bachelor degrees are in child development and liberal studies, and I have minors in English, math, and psychology. I have weird areas of interest. They're all over. My graduate degree was in curriculum and, ironically, technology, and my project focused on the development of the adolescent brain and how technology was affecting that. And that's how I kind of came to learn about all of this and read tons and tons of studies. And we really haven't been able to maximize the use of studies because it takes about 5 years to kind of figure out if something is working to affect change. And now those studies are really coming into their own and maturing. And what we're finding is, you know, you want to be on the forefront of cutting edge technology, and so you jump in and you're kind of swimming with it. And you don't always know how it's going to end up. So we, several years ago, we started an iPad program in the middle school. We were one-to-one. We were one of the first schools in Columbus. There were 2 that year, actually, that did it. And so we checked out an iPad to our students, and they kept it with them for the whole year. They took it home after school. We got them library accounts to the Columbus Library online so they could check out digital books. We had them taking notes on the iPad. We had all sorts of learning apps on there. And we really thought, boy, this is just going to propel them forward. And what we started to notice on our own about the second year, the first thing we noticed was that, man, test scores really aren't going up. We should be getting a return on our investment after this second year. And there's really not a change in test scores. And in fact, reading scores were going down. Okay, so we had to kind of look at that. That was our first thing. The second thing that stood out to us was student behavior. We started to have a lot of student behavior problems. Irritability, aggression, those kind of things. So our students, before, when they would walk the halls and they would skitter into the door right as the bell rang because they were talking to their friends in the hallway, Well, they had a 4-minute passing period, and they were in your classroom within the first minute, so they could spend 3 minutes playing on their iPad, and whatever they had on there. So what that did is that pulled them away from each other. Their heads were always in their screens. So they got to class, they wanted to take it out to recess. We had a fight on our hand. No, you can't take your iPad out to recess, go play. Okay? They were not happy about that. So what happened is they pulled more and more away from each other, which made them irritable with each other. It made them impatient. They were less tolerable because they didn't have that relational interaction anymore. So we immediately, when we saw that, we thought, you know what? The only difference, the change that we made was the iPad. We need to start looking at what's going on there. And around that time, the study started coming out that when people read online, not just children, adults, that the brain doesn't take in information digitally the same way it does in print. So there is a value to holding a book. There are signals sent to your brain. When you turn the pages of a book, it actually helps put the information in your brain sequentially, which is what you don't get on a screen. You can see how far you are along in the book. That actually has an effect on your reading. The fact that there's not a bright backlit light, which that light, we don't see the flicker, but the brain sees the flicker, and it actually disrupts the learning process. So the first thing we did is we took away the online library. We said no more books on Kindle. You have to go back to books. And so the reason their reading scores were dropping is because they weren't remembering the information that they were reading digitally. When we put them back into books, then their scores went back up. And so the truth became, as it has always been, the only way that our children are going to get better at reading is by reading more, reading books, actual books. And then we noticed the behavior change when we took it away. So what had happened is when they were taking it home and they had access to it 24/7, there was no way that we could take iMessage off the iPad. And I don't know if you know this about your iPhone. You can't take it off your iPhone either. You can go into your controls and turn it off, but you can't block them from going in and turning it back on. So they would be in group chats, they'd have it in a room, and that thing was dinging all night long, disrupting their sleep. They'd wake up to answer it. They didn't want to miss out. When we took that back away from them, and then they actually had to interact with each other again in the hallways, it made a huge difference. Behavior issues went back down, very few again. They weren't as irritable. They smiled again. I mean, they were surly. I'm not exaggerating. They were moody and surly, and I know teens sometimes get that label anyway, but they were moody-er and surly-er, okay? And nobody needs that. So research, again, began to show, college research, professors began to wonder, man, our students are bringing laptops to class, they're taking better notes than ever, but our performance is going down. They're not doing as well on assessments. What's going on? And what they found is because students can type as fast as you speak, they could record every word, and so they did. And so the brain didn't have to focus on what the professor was saying. It didn't have to identify a main idea and pull it out. And so it was actually hindering their learning and not helping. And now a lot of college professors are saying, no, you may not have screens in my classroom. I was at Barnes & Noble this last week and talking to the gentleman at the front. We were talking about, I don't know, Moleskine has a paper that you can take notes on, but the pen sends the information to your smart device wherever it is so that you have a computer copy and you have a paper copy. He says, you know, I'm trying to decide, do I want to get this or do I want to get a laptop? And my daughter says, what's to decide? Of course you want the laptop. And he said, yeah, but my professors won't let me have it in class. And so they're really starting to pick up on that, which I think is interesting. So we are also following that and going back to what works. And one of the great things about Grace Christian is we are always looking for the research. We're always looking for what's the best practice for our students to learn and for their health. So this year, we are really taking a hard look at their social media, because now we're not giving them the iPad or the screens. They have their own. And we are seeing some very concerning things. So I just want to tell you some things about technology in the brain. And in your Unplugged roundtable, under resources, there are a couple books. One is Brain-Based Learning, the New Paradigm of Teaching. It's really not new. Eric Jensen's been around forever and he's amazing. This one's very easy to read, big font, lots of white space, so it's not scientific-y, but it does give you everything that you want to know. But what he does is he kind of goes through and he talks about how your child learns according to all of the senses. So what they see and what they hear, what they smell, can smell affect? And the answer is yes. Aromatherapy has shown some things, some great benefits in the brain. For example, smelling rosemary while they study improves memory retention by 75%. Lavender increases it 15 to 20%. So there are things in here, and he has no ties to anything like Young Living, doTERRA. He has no ties. He's completely objective third party who studies the brain and says there are things that you can do to aid your student in different ways. It has to do with what they see, what they're doing physically, how they're handling things. The other one we'll talk more in depth is if you feel that your child maybe has a screen addiction, and we'll talk about what are some red flags and how do we know that. This book is called Reset Your Child's Brain, and it's a 4-week plan to kind of detox and then retrain. Okay? So detox and retrain. And if you have a girl, even if you don't, if you only have sons, they're going to have girlfriends, so it's worthy reading. There's a book called American Girls, Social Media and the Secret Lives of Teenagers. And she follows groups of girls at ages 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Each chapter is a different age. And what the effect social media has had on them, or what are some things that they've gotten into that they couldn't get out of. I'll give you an example. I was rereading the chapter on 13-year-olds, since that's the age that I'm most dealing with closely right now. And there was a story in there where the girls will say that the boys will ask them for nudes. So they ask them for naked pictures of themselves quite often. And the girls are like, we don't want to give them. But the way that you turn a boy down matters. So if you're just kind of chill about it and you LOL, then you have a good chance of getting out unscathed. But if you are to stand up for yourself and say, absolutely not, I am not doing that, then the rumors start. So there's a story about a little girl in here who had liked this boy, and they had dated as much as you can date, I guess, in the 8th grade, and they broke up. And he had asked her for nudes, and she had said no. So he went around and spread a rumor that she had performed oral sex on him. And it didn't matter that she hadn't. All the kids bought into it. She had been in the popular crowd. She wasn't a child that you would normally see as a target. She had been one of the queens in the school. Everybody bought into it. Everybody shunned her. Everyone gave her a hard time. And it talks about how, she tries to come out of that. She says, it doesn't matter what I say. They believe what they hear. And there's no way I can prove otherwise. So this is called American Girls, Social Media, and the Secret Lives of Teenagers. I don't believe that one's on your resource list, but you're welcome to look at it at the end if you like. So what we have is this no solid evidence that technology enhances learning and brain development, but now all sorts of evidence coming out that it hampers both. Okay, so it doesn't help it, doesn't enhance it, but it is hampering it. I've told you most positive studies are industry-based, so as you go forth and you look for studies on your own, please look at who's financing this study. Because they say that you can go out and you can find research to defend anything you want to say, and that's probably true, but I think the most important question is who's funding the research, and look for your bias there. When children and adults are engaged with interactive screens, a TV is a passive screen. We can talk about that later. It has its negative aspects, but it doesn't affect the brain anywhere near an interactive screen, a cell phone, a laptop, a tablet, video games, those kinds of things. So there's a stress response. Whenever we, even us, or our students engage in a game online, even Minecraft, it puts the brain into fight or flight mode. So what happens is it becomes survival. Isn't that what most games are? It's a reward center, it's survival, it makes you kind of want to keep playing. So it's a stress response. And when your body goes into fight or flight, then it needs to release a stress hormone called cortisol, which your adrenal glands take care of. Kids who are constantly in their screens are constantly producing this cortisol, and it runs low, and they end up with something called adrenal fatigue or adrenal failure. And that results in things like chronic fatigue syndrome, weight gain, sleep disturbances, mood disorders. All of these come from it, and you don't realize it. A lot of times you don't know what causes it. You're taking your child to the doctor and you're saying, we're having these issues, and they're running all of these tests, and they're saying, we don't know. We don't know why that is. And what they're learning is that they are constantly in a state of stress. And even games, like Minecraft doesn't seem very exciting. It's not an action game. But even Minecraft, anything that has a reward center, posting a picture on Instagram and stressing over how many likes you get. There are kids who will strategically wait and post things on social media at certain times because they know it's a better traffic hour and they'll get more likes, even if they have to stay up to a certain time to do it. LED lights are being linked to retinal damage and a narrowing of the retinal blood vessels, which is a marker for future cardiovascular disease. So if you've ever been on a computer screen for a long length of time and then you tried to read a book and you have trouble focusing in, right, that's what that is a result of. And I would hope most of us are not on screens as much as our children. So sadly, they're on it way more than we are. Screen brightness, quick movements, and super saturated colors all contribute to visual sensory overload, and they overload the sensory system. So if you have a child who's ADD or ADHD, they're already overloaded. So when they pick up a screen, they're putting overload on top of overload. And what they're finding is if your child is medicated, like with Ritalin, that being on screens does away with any of the benefits of the Ritalin. So it actually overwhelms the medication. So they're not getting any benefit. So if you are finding that your student, you are constantly having to increase the dosage, look at how much time they're spending on their screens or how much game time they're playing. They're finding that electronic screen time is actually masquerading as ADD, ADHD, and bipolar depression. So these kids are being diagnosed with this, but when they go through resetting, when they go through a fast and you take the technology away, the symptoms disappeared and they never had ADD, ADHD, or bipolar to begin with. They were having a reaction to their brain's response to being on interactive screens. They say that those who are addicted to their screens, we'll talk about how maybe you can find that out, have brains that light up in the exact same way as someone addicted to cocaine. So when they sit down with their screens and they run brain scans on them, the same places light up. It is an addiction. I had some students in my class this week. I can tell you we've been talking about screens, and I told them, you know, what we were looking for this year and the challenge that we were putting forth. And we had a back to school night, and I told parents about it. And the next day I had a student come in, and he said, Miss Naylor, when you talked about that, I thought you were joking, but my mom at back to school night said you told the parents that. And I said, yes, I did. And this little girl says, were you serious? I said, it was a heart attack. And she said, you're not taking my phone away. Nobody's taking my phone away. That's a sign of an addiction. When I announced it in class, and I wasn't even asking them to fast. What I was asking them to do was turn in your phone to your parents at 6 o'clock every night. There were a couple who had an immediate physical response to that, even like, oh my gosh, I can't do it. I can't do it. It's an immediate fear. They couldn't do it. Multitasking, even though we think our kids are good at it, they have a lot of tabs open, we think we're good at it. I think I'm great at it, and I should have 54 tabs open at once. We're not. Every time you have to switch your attention, it stresses the body. Okay, and it has a physiological effect on you that you aren't even being aware of. And the same thing is true for your kids, so they're really not taking anything in that they're doing. They're just jumping around. So even if they managed to get the assignment done, they probably got very little out of it learning-wise. Cognitive effects, it's hard for them to retain new information. Short-term memory suffers, and they're finding that things that you take in digitally doesn't stay in your short-term memory long enough to make it to your long-term memory. So that could be things that you've read online. Now, I don't know if any of you have had an experience. I had an experience with, when the Kindles first came out, my husband, Mr. Tech Geek, he was like, oh my gosh, you have to have this. Because I have hundreds of books and I love to read. And he said, this is going to be your thing. And I said, no, but I don't want it. You know, I like the feel of books, the weight of them. I like to feel their pages. Sometimes they're small. They're on the thing. You know, all of that matters even when I'm looking at a book. And he's like, no, I'm telling you, it was Christmas break. I really don't want one. He bought me one for Christmas. And I was like, fine, but I'm not using it. And I had my book, and I finished a book, and lo and behold, it was book 1 of a trilogy. And we had moved from Ohio to Southern California. We didn't have to deal with snow. There's a lot of snow out, so I couldn't really drive to the bookstore, but I was desperate to read that second book, like I wanted it right now, right? And all of a sudden I looked at that Kindle and thought, I bet I could have that book right now if I downloaded it to the Kindle. And so I did. And in the middle school, we take field trips that are a week long, and suddenly in my head, this became a jukebox for books. Like, man, I can only pack like 5 books, but on my Kindle I can carry like 1,000, because really I'm going to read 1,000 books in 6 days, right? So, but just the idea that I could have access to any of them, I thought it was the best thing. When I read a book, I tend to jot down, ironically in an online journal, kind of what the premise of the book was, the summary, what I liked. If there were quotes that I liked, I threw them in there, because kind of highlight them, mark the pages. And I was going back through, I was talking to Mrs. Phillips about it last year, I was going back through my online journal and I was reading what I wrote. On the right-hand side, it lists the books that I had read, and I didn't recognize a lot of the titles. And I was like, and my journal's not that old, it's only a couple years old, and I thought, oh, I don't remember reading that. I clicked on it, and sure enough, right there in my words, I do recognize my own writing, in my thoughts, in my words was a summary of the book, quotes that I apparently liked, links that I had made to things in my life, but from those quotes, I had absolutely no memory of the story. Those were books I read on my Kindle. Books that I read that I held, I remember, they stay with me. So it was just further what we suspected, what the studies are starting to show, and personal experience showing me how that works. They have noticed that cognitive effects of screen time, things like forgetfulness, falling grades, tendency to lose things. Now, all kids lose things to a certain extent, but you will know it is more pronounced. You will think, why can't you remember? And I started seeing it in my youngest one over this last year when she was little. In 3rd grade, even though my kids have always been exposed to technology, she wasn't on it as much. And she was like my secretary. Okay, she could tell me everything. I loved to have a personal assistant. Hey, Mom, don't forget. If she had something that had to be signed for school, don't forget this has to be signed for school. I need to take it today. So-and-so needs this. Don't forget Dad said this. And I was like, man, this was a great reason to have kids. You know? Take her everywhere. She knows everything that's going on. And then she started in 4th grade when she became more active with her peers into this interactive world. And I didn't know that that was the connection at the time. She became more interactive in this world. Suddenly she started forgetting things. And I would ask her to go do something, and she would go and never come back. Anybody have that happen? So I sent her up to get something, and she never comes back. And I see her 20 minutes later, I'm like, did you bring that? She's like, oh, totally forgot. And initially, I thought, well, maybe she's kind of getting older. We see some of these shifts when they get into 4th grade, and they start, approaching puberty. Then her teacher talked to me, she said, hey, you had her tested for ADD. And she's like, I'm really seeing some markers here. And so we kind of went through that whole process, and it was determined that she did in fact qualify under that, and we chose not to medicate her and to work on it in other ways. And at the time, one of those ways we worked on it was not technology. It's never crossed my mind that the screens in her hand could be causing the symptoms. It was just maybe that's how she was wired, to have ADD. So when we started pulling back on our girls last year, then we started to notice differences, and we started to notice improvements. And then we messed it all up again, but I'll tell you about that later. The other thing is IQ trends. So IQs had been rising steadily, and they had predicted that if IQs kept rising at the rate that they were rising, that they were going to hit what they called the IQ ceiling. Around 2007, it defied research, and IQ started going the other way. And what they found is it's in direct correlation to how technology has taken over our world. And we have seen it here. So we don't have IQ scores, but we have something called a scholastic index, cognitive scholastic index, which tells us kind of our children's potential for learning. And when I first started, it wasn't unusual to have 5 or so kids in a class with a CSI score in the 140s or above. And we are lucky now if we have one in the entire middle school that high. So we are seeing a regression on that. The good news is, can it be reversed? it can be reversed. It can be reversed. So there is some good news in here. Impaired social interactiveness, one thing is defensiveness. So I don't know if you've noticed when your kids are playing video games that they're usually grouchier if you talk to them, interrupt them, or afterward they're more irritable. If you want to kind of prove to yourself that it puts the body in fight or flight response, they say when your child gets off a video game, go over to them and ask them to look at you and try to maintain eye contact for 10 seconds, and they can't do it. Because primitively, we are set up not to do that when we feel threatened, to maintain eye contact. And so they won't be able to do it, and you will know that something's going on. Increases a sense of social isolation and depression. My oldest is very introverted. She has severe social anxiety. She doesn't always read facial cues correctly or feel comfortable in her skin. She feels, ironically, very comfortable with adults and very comfortable with young people. But in her own age group, that is not a comfort zone for her. And so I was reading her kind of some of these things that might apply to her as I try to appeal to the scientist within her and convince her some ways, because she's 16 and she's going to be moving on, and I need her to do this independently because she knows it's healthy for her and not because I'm at home doing it. So I am trying to prime her scientifically, because she loves science, that, hey, man, this kind of sounds like to you. Do you think that there could be a connection? And what they found is that typically what we do when we have kids like that is they get along with other kids better online, right? They feel safer. They're not as shy. They're more outgoing. And so we think that that's improvement, and actually it's a detriment to them when they are in person. And it actually puts them at greater risk for depression. And what they're seeing now, and I know that you are seeing it, is there is an increase in severe depression in our youth and suicide. And where are they advertising their suicides? On their social media. So if last year you may have seen kids who were hanging themselves on Facebook Live so their friends could watch. I don't think it helped them be more social. And if you're shy and you're not outgoing and someone says something negative to you online, that just sticks with you, because you don't have the courage to confront them in person. What it does is, I don't want to go back to school. I don't want to go there. They say mean things to me when I'm not there. So she said to me when I read her the quote that was talking about it's actually worse for you, people think it's better. She goes, I don't know, Mom. You know, when I was really in the depths of my depression, it really helped to be online and to kind of be able to reach out. And I said, no, you think it helped, but it didn't. You thought it did, because you felt like you were interacting. But I can't tell you the number of times when she's really keyed into her social technology and her social media, how many times I will get a text from her, I'm lonely, I'm stressed. Well, if you have 500 friends, which she doesn't, but I'm saying if you have 500 friends, how are you lonely? Why are you stressed? Because she and our kids, everybody on their social media is a friend. You heard that? My friend did this. My friend did that. My friend had quadruplets. What? I don't know anybody having quadruplets. But she loves babies, and so, you know, there's like an online makeup group, she loves makeup, that she's in, and the women in there are having children. Those become her friends. And I try to explain to her, those aren't your friends. You don't know them. If you were in a moment of need, none of them are coming to your rescue. Those are not friends. And so we told her that she couldn't friend anybody on social media that she didn't know in real life. Okay? And my girl is nothing if not resourceful, because you have to know with teenagers what matters is the number of friends you have. So in her head was, how is I going to get that number up if it can only be people I know? I'm an introvert, don't have a big circle. She friended all my friends, and she friended all my husband's friends. Good times, I tell you. Yeah. Yeah, she tried to friend you too, right? She tried to friend my whole friend list. Okay? Yeah. So we're in the car one day, and she's sitting next to me, and she goes, oh my gosh, my friend auditioned for The Voice. And I said, who? Because I would know all her friends, right? And she said, you wouldn't know her. Kelly Naylor Stoka. And I looked at her and I said, the girl I I went to elementary school. Yeah, I know her. So just, they get these virtual worlds that they think are really real. It's their reality, and it's not real, and they can't differentiate between the two. And I feel bad for you, actually, because you're probably sitting there going, yes, I can. No, you can't. I'm sorry, you can't. I wanted to look up some red flags for screen addiction. I'm just going to read you some things if you wanted to know if you see your child in any of these. There's a couple of charts I wanted to kind of go over with you. Lying about device use or length of time used, or sneaking to use devices such as in bed after lights out or while on screen restriction. Preferring to use electronics over every other activity, losing interest in other activities, or losing one's natural sense of curiosity about the world. If it's not on a screen, it's boring. Becoming increasingly socially isolated and or using screen activity to escape from stress or avoid others. In older teens and young adults, an inability to voluntarily cut back on the amount or frequency of use. Okay, they can't cut back on their own, even if they want to. Continued use despite adverse consequences, whether social, academic, or health, or escalating use. Excessive negotiating when play is restricted, or becoming inappropriately angry or devastated when screen limits are imposed or even merely discussed. Signs of physical deconditioning such as shortness of breath, muscle weakness, or wasting weight gain or fatigue. Poor reality testing, trouble discerning game from reality or dissociative tendencies, feeling unreal or that surroundings aren't real. Excessive or escalating use of multi-member online role-playing games as their primary source of social interaction. So if you talk to our students about restricting their technology, they are not happy campers. So when we kind of pulled back this year and we said, no, we're not going to do this, and you're not going to use it at this time, they were respectful, but they were not happy. So here are some things that you might notice, and I'm going to give you some categories. The first one is emotional. You can just kind of think to yourself, maybe put a check mark on your paper every time you hear something that might describe moments with your child. Meltdowns, irritable mood, depressed mood, fearfulness, nightmares, separation anxiety, isolative or withdrawn. It's normal for teenagers to spend some time alone in their room, but when they are addicted to social media or screens, you hardly ever see them when you're home. Doesn't enjoy activities, easily frustrated, compulsive, and obsessive. Behaviorally, defiant, argues a lot, raises their voice, aggression, defensiveness, hyperactivity, can't stay on task, messy room, refuses chores, impulsive, or can't get ready. School-related, forgets homework, easily distracted, disruptive in class, trouble learning, poor concentration, fights reading, it's one of the biggest fights we have, struggles in math, procrastination, and underachievement. Socially, poor sportsmanship, blames others, annoys their peers, lacks empathy, can't read others, inconsiderateness, poor eye contact, avoids face-to-face, no or few friends, immaturity. Physically, headaches, stomach aches, migraines, body aches, back or neck pain, low energy, out of shape, overweight, craves sweets, tics or stuttering, trouble sleeping or oversleeping. Anybody have a check on their paper? I probably have quite a few on my paper. So I'll quickly kind of give you an experience that I had last year with my oldest, reading about this, knowing about resetting, and kind of, I tend to be skeptical about most things, but I was at a point of, what do I have to lose by doing this? What do I have to lose by trying it, by taking away my child's screens or social media? And the answer was, I really had nothing to lose. At most, I find out that that wasn't a cause, and I can return it and it would be fine. But I might find out that it actually had something to do with some things that were going on. So I took, there was an event that happened, and I took my daughter's phone away from her. I would tell you when you do this, the first week to 2 are the absolute hardest, depending on how addicted your kids are. They will go through anxiety. Some of them will have something that looks like panic attacks. They will bargain with you. They will negotiate. They will start to get angry, and they will lash out at you verbally. They will keep asking you when they're going to get their phone back. I told her as long as she was asking, she wasn't going to get it back because that was a sign that she still was addicted to it. Those first 2 weeks, I'm not going to lie to you, they were tough. They were tough. We were one step shy of The Exorcist and her head spinning around, and that is no lie. And I think it was her plan was to make my life so miserable that I would just give it back to make it go away. And, you know, you would think she would know me by now, but I guess not. So, come on, I teach middle school. And so it became like an episode of Survivor for me, and it was going to be outwit, outlast, outplay, and she was not going to win. It was my island. So I actually kept it for 11 weeks. 11 weeks. She even went so far at a checkup with her pediatrician. They ask you when your child is a certain age if you would mind leaving the room because they have conversations with your child one-on-one. So while she had his ear one-on-one, she pled her case. Didn't he think, at this point we're at week 8, that 8 weeks of restriction was a bit excessive? Really? So he comes out to the waiting room to get me, and we step into a room. He goes, "Hey, I just wanted to ask you about something." He says, "Alana tells me, that she's been grounded for 8 weeks." And I said, "Yep." He says, "Believe it or not, God love it. Don't you think it's a bit excessive?" Did she tell you what she did? Well, no. Well, let me tell you. And when we were done, he goes, "Okay." And that was the end of that. But, I gave her points for creativity, reaching out to that objective third party. But yeah, not happening. So they will do things. Once we got past that 2 weeks and she quit asking, man, she was a different kid. She was a different kid. And her social anxiety and her depression is part of who she is. It's not all related for her to technology. But boy, did it make a difference night and day. She was more social. She was happier. She smiled more. She went back to reading. She has become from a not a reader to a voracious reader. She can read a 300-page novel in a day and remember it. It's amazing. She loves to write. Prolifically, she will write. But when she is on screens, she gives them both up. But she went back to her reading, and she went back to her writing. Her grades were great. She was downstairs more. She was interacting with the family more. It was beautiful. There were some side effects, I will be honest. One of them is she is in high school. She's at a BYOT high school, bring your own technology. Teachers require they have the screens in class. There's not much you can do about that. And then the other thing was with her peer group at school. So imagine you have social anxiety, and it's tough enough for you. Now your mom has taken your connection to your table group away, and she would get to lunch, and they were tolerant for the first couple weeks because they'd all been grounded for a week or 2 before, but nobody else had the psychotic mom who grounded them for 11 weeks, right? So they got tired of filling her in. And I've told my kids in my classroom, first couple days of school, I told them this story, and I said, so here's what happened. I took it away from her, and her friends were in constant communication all day because they're allowed to come out of school, all afternoon, all night, all through the next day till lunch. So they had covered a lot of ground by the time they got to lunch. When my daughter got there, she didn't have a clue what was going on. And so she would ask, "Fill me, what's going on? Who said that? Wait, what are you talking about?" They got tired of it. They didn't want to do it. And they shut her out. And they shunned her. And they quit inviting her to things because she was hard to get to. So for me, that was heartbreaking. I mean, if anything was going to push me to give it back, that was it. And that is part of the reason why on Christmas break, everything had been so great. I thought, wow, she gets it. And I gave it back in a limited capacity. And first I said it had to stay downstairs. And things stayed great. She would run over, she'd check on it for 5 minutes, and then she'd go back and do her business. But it was so great, and then school started again. And she had to take it to school with her for the BYOT, bring your own technology, things that they were doing. So then she had it during school hours. And then gradually, you just kind of relax and you lose sight of it until we were actually back where we started. We were back where we started. And all those behaviors came back. The isolation, the arguing, the defiance. So it has been a learning curve, and now we're adjusting yet again, and I have to adjust for her age and where she's going and where she's at, and I have 2 years, less than 2 years, to train her to be able to monitor this on her own. So we are. Things that help: nutrition, diet, sleep. Your kids need about 9.25 hours of sleep a night, and every time they're on a screen, their brain can't put itself to sleep, and when it does go to sleep, it's not in the deep sleep that they need. Simply being outside, seeing the color green and oxygen has a great effect, especially on ADHD, but for all kids. Oxygen, the brain needs 3 things, and one of them is oxygen, so the more that they can get that, the better off they are. What I would say to you is know that no matter how savvy you are, in spite of whatever new parental monitoring app tries to tell you, you cannot lock this world down. And so that's where we are. Where do we go from here, and what do we do as parents? How can I kind of save my child? You can't make it safe. I tried. I'll tell you some of the things I tried. I ran multiple programs in tandem on our devices. We had Teen Safe on her phone. We had the Disney Circle. We had Verizon Family Base all running at the same time. And she still got around it. So you just can't lock it down. So Teen Safe, they say that it gives you access. You can see everything that's texted in real time. It never runs on real time. It glitches out all the time. It won't show you videos or pictures. It will just tell you that a picture or a video was sent. If you want anything to spike your anxiety, start checking those. What you sending? Okay. The Disney Circle, it hooks into your Wi-Fi. It controls your Wi-Fi, which is great. You can pause it, like at dinner times. There's no argument. You just hit pause on your phone, and it pauses them. It puts them in suspended animation, which is great if they don't have a data plan, which is where you need Verizon Family Base to lock down the data plan, which is great when it works. So there's all these workarounds. If Disney Circle often disconnects from your Wi-Fi, you can pay an extra $10 a month so you can try to control their Wi-Fi when they're at a friend's house. They can't get on their friend's Wi-Fi. They'll just switch to their friend's device. Don't need to get yourself. So then I thought, okay, none of those are working. I blocked YouTube. But if they download the Kick app, they can get to YouTube through Kick, even if you blocked YouTube on their phone. So they can get to these apps through other apps. It's amazing. So then I said, I've always said I have to have every social media account that you belong to, so you're assuming that they're telling you all of them. I need your username and your passwords. I set up an independent third iPad, signed into all of her stuff, so it would run in real time, because then you saw, as she's typing, you can watch it, right? So while you're at work, go ahead and put that iPad next to you, and you sit there and watch your child's social life. See how much nobody has time. So you can't do it 24/7, right? Something's going to get by you that you're not going to see. And if your battery dies, you're going to miss everything in that time, because when you charge it back up, it's not going to tell you anything that happened in the time your piece was down anyway. They still get around it. They still find ways. So even though I had that, I did find out that there were people she was messaging through iMessage, not inappropriately, but that she was messaging that weren't showing on the iPad. So again, there's nothing you can do to be 100% safe and to know what's going on. App creation is too fast and furious daily. A lot of them offering anonymity. Some of you know now on Facebook they can have secret groups. Right? So you don't know about that because they don't tell you who the members are. So you don't know if your child's in there or not, but you can't see them. They can set up secret groups in their Facebook Messenger, so you won't see those. Instagram seemed safe for a while because they were just posting pictures, but Instagram has a direct messaging. They spend a lot of their time in there. And then what they do is they don't want you to see it. They just delete the conversation immediately after they have it, and you'll never know it took place. So if you're thinking my child would never, I would encourage you to have a conversation with me, because I'll tell you some things about your child would never, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but I mean that in a very honest and truthful way. And it doesn't mean that the children are bad, they're not, but they're just navigating a world that is overly mature for them. So if you really want to know the effect technology is having on your children, then you can take the 30-day fast challenge. It's in this book. That may be difficult, especially if you have middle schoolers, because technology is used in the classroom. They have to have access. Some things that I've heard from students, when I told them, I said, the problem is when you have your cell phone next to you and you're doing homework, you're constantly looking, and that is going off, and you're getting distracted. And I said, put it away. Don't put it anywhere near you. And one of my students says, I will get in trouble after school if my parent calls and I don't answer the phone. And I said, well, here's what you do. You put your phone in the kitchen, and you can actually go into your parents' contact and set them up as an emergency bypass, and then turn off your notifications, and your parent will be allowed to get through. But you won't hear all the notifications for all of your social media. And maybe, I don't know, maybe you even still have one of those old-fashioned home phones you can call your kids on. If not, your cable company will give you one. And then if they're watching TV, it'll pop right up there. Mom's calling. Something, you know. So I understand that it is hard to go completely off. I will say that if your child is having difficulties, if you are struggling with things like anxiety and depression and behavior issues, then I would definitely, for a length of time, try to just cut it and then gradually reintroduce it. It says parents will feel overwhelmed and that it's too hard. If you're like me, you'll miss all the photos your child would take digitally if they had it. Your child's reaction may push you to the edge and you're just like, forget it, just take it and go. I don't have time. Shunning by peers, and that's why we're asking our school community, guys, if we come together as a community of parents and we do this together, none of our children are being left out. So, I mean, we can win here for your children. You can give their child your back. If I tell my child that she can't be on it past 6 o'clock, then I don't have to worry that someone else's child is under what they call FOMO, fear of missing out, and having that anxiety. Because when that child gets to school the next day, guess what? They didn't miss anything. Because no one else was on either. So, what's that commercial we hear on HGTV all the time? Teamwork makes the dream work, right? Hear that all the time. Makes you crazy, but look, it sticks. If you are not sure, you're not buying into any of this, all I can say to you is what do you have to lose by trying it? And that's what I did in testing it and seeing for yourself. You might feel that it's hopeless because it's everywhere. Okay, I'm going to take it away and we're not going to have it at home, but they go to their friend's house. What am I going to do there? What am I going to do when they're at school? And that's just something that you're going to have to navigate with your friends' parents. And just as you would tell your child's friends' parents that they can't watch certain movies, you can just say, our desire is that our child is not on social media. And we tell our children's friends when they come over, you're going to check your phone into the basket. The phone's not going to be upstairs with you. And there are friends who won't come over because they can't have their technology open all the time. And sometimes we worry how it will affect our use. Am I going to have to model this? No, man. And the answer is really, we glorify busy because we can be connected all the time. So yes, we should be modeling it for our own health because it's having the same effect in us that it's having in our children. So we kind of experimented with this summer, and I will be honest with you. I mean, I had some anxiety the first time I did it, and I kept thinking, oh my gosh, Mrs. Phillips is going to text me, or she's going to email me, and she's going to need something for school, and I'm not going to get it, and she's going to have to wait. And you know what? Got back to her the next day. It's all good. She didn't care. We all lived, and it all got done. And so now I find that when I get home, I put my phone down. The problem is I'm often forgetting where I'm putting it. And all of a sudden it will be 4 or 5 hours later, and I'll be like, oh, shoot, somebody might have texted me. I better go check that out. Okay. But what I find is that I had more time than I ever knew I had. More time than I ever knew I had. So even when I go online and I'm doing work for school, I'm just going to pop over to Facebook for a minute to see what's going on. Then I'm going to see this article about this, which leads to this article about that, which leads to this article about that, which, hey, maybe I'll go on Feedly and check out maybe those 150 blogs I subscribe to about people I don't even know. Why should I care? But apparently I do and did. And you know what? I quit reading them. And my life isn't any poorer for it. I didn't know those people in real life anyway. You know, no matter how connected I felt to them because I was reading their daily writings. So really it's a win-win for everyone. So here's what we're asking you as a school. We're not requiring you to take everything away from your children and do a fast, although if you have reasons to, I would encourage you to do it because that is the best way to see the results. Even if you do it just long enough to, again, what this is to reset their brain, for 4 weeks. But we are asking that you take screens from your children by 6 o'clock, if at all possible. Put them in a general charging location in your bedroom, because they will get up at night if they're in the hallway and check them. And you can put your own phone there, or put your phone on ringer and tell your people in your life that if you really need to get a hold of me in the evening hours, you should call instead of text, if it's really important. And then you'll hear it ring from another room, like those old-fashioned phones used to use. You will feel less stressed. I feel less stressed. Everything improves. Sleep improves. You actually talk to the people in your house more, sometimes. Okay? So we're working hard on our end at school, and we have pulled technology back into the classroom and committed to trying to send very little technology home. Anything we send home that has to be done online, hopefully to be done before the hours of 6 p.m. But even more than that at most, in most classes, is maybe in the middle school they'd have to type something, but you don't have to be connected to the internet to type. So when I took my daughter's screens away from her, and I originally gave them back, and I gave her laptop back for writing, because she loves to write, I gave it back minus Wi-Fi. So she could use Word, but she couldn't go anywhere. Because she said, Mom, I really like to write. Okay, here. She's like, oh, yes. Oh. I can't get, you don't get to get online to use Word. Well, how am I going to print it? Well, put a thumb drive in it, and then bring it down to my computer and print. So you can do that. Having your computer in a general location for them to do their homework where you can see what's going on. So you can make sure that they're staying focused and on their homework, so that their computers aren't up in their bedroom or where you can't see them. Doesn't mean you have to sit next to them all the time, but just being in a general open location will keep them accountable. So that's what we're asking. 6 o'clock, cut it off. Put it on the charger. That gives them enough time for their brains to recover, serotonin to kick in, get a good night's sleep, and be back at it the next day. And what they're recommending is that if your child is under the age of 12, that you don't put a smart device in their hands. If you need them to have a phone because they come home and they're alone after school, or they go to sports practice and they may need to tell you about something, give them a flip phone and let them call you and talk to you. Or they can text the 3 letters per thing. Okay? But guess what? You're not putting them in danger of the internet. You're not letting strangers into your home, and you're not letting strangers speak into your children at a critical time.